To paint a Space Marine in the Salamander's colors, I begin by priming it with a black primer. Make sure the black primer gives good coverage on the whole model so you don't have any light gray areas showing through. Next, I give the entire model a heavy dusting of Army Painter Desert Yellow colored primer. This tan colored sort of yellow provides a very good base for our next step, which is to wash the entire model with Citadel Wash's Thraka Green. I'll be using a hog bristle fan blender to apply it in a nice even coat and to try and minimize any brush streaking that comes with using smaller brushes with a wash. I like to really saturate the brush and work it deep into the crevices, such as behind the bolter and up under the arms and around the backpack, kind of just forcing the bristles in behind that area to make sure the wash gets just about everywhere, because you do want those deeper areas to be darker. By dusting on the colored primer, we did leave a little bit of the black showing in those darker areas, and the wash will just help accentuate that sort of shading. The Salamander is primarily green, so you want to go ahead and just basically wash everything. The only part I'm not really washing is the bolter. You'll notice here I actually miss washing his fingertips holding the front of the bolter. I'll come back and get those later. Using the green wash over the yellow base coat means we get some really good natural highlighting from this wash, because it will be almost yellow at the very sharpest edges, but a very dark green in the deepest recesses, and this provides a very nice natural progression of color. Once I'm done applying the wash, I'll just set the model down to dry for about an hour or so. When you use a very thick wash like this, it can take quite a while, so it's helpful if you have other models to paint in the meantime, or something else to do. I'm gonna go play some PlayStation. So you can see the green wash is now fully dry, and we have some really excellent shading happening on this model, going to some really good highlights and down to some very dark greens. Our next step will be to take some pure black, or chaos black if you're using GW colors, and paint in the shoulder pads and a few other details. On Salamanders, it's typical for one knee pad to also be painted black, as well as the backpack. In this case, I'm only going to paint part of the backpack, just to speed things along. It's been my experience that Salamanders are one of the fastest Space Marine armies to paint, because you can get your entire base coat out of a colored primer and a single wash, and the other colors go over that very, very effectively. Black almost always covers in a single coat, and then we'll be using some gold for some detailing and a few other very minor colors that also cover quite well. Now I'm going to go ahead and paint one knee pad black. Typically you would have a company number or something similar on that knee pad, or something just to decorate it, but in order to get this model painted as fast as possible, it's just going to be plain black, which will still help it stand out from the green one on the other side. I'm going to paint the two exhaust ports on the backpack with this black as well. This will help break up the model from the back where it looks very, very plain green otherwise, and gives the impression that there's been some paint applied to the backpack without the labor involved of painting the entire thing. You can see I am slowing down and being a little bit careful around the vent and when I get near the other parts of the backpack, just to make sure I don't slip up. Because our green comes from a wash over a colored primer, it is a little bit tricky trying to match it with other colors. It would be very difficult to just pick up a regular green off your color palette and try to cover up something if you made a mistake here, so I'm being a little more careful than usual. Next, I'll be using Citadel Color bolt gun metal to paint parts of the bolt gun, namely the ammo clip, the back end where the handle is, and the barrel itself, as well as the physical vents on the backpack. I'll be painting the rest of the bolter casing with another color after this, so I can be a little bit sloppy with the bolt gunmetal, and it's okay if it gets onto areas that it's not supposed to be. This is probably the trickiest part, just painting the small slotted areas inside the 3 vents on the backpack, just because I want to try and avoid getting it on any of the black areas so I don't have to repaint those. Now we're just about done with the bolt gunmetal there. I'm going to get out the Thraka green wash and just get his fingers where they're holding the front of the bolter, because I've obviously missed those. Because it's such a small area, I can keep working on other parts of the model while I let the wash dry here. And now I'll be using Citadel Foundation Adeptus Battle Grey to paint the bolter casing. Adeptus Battle Grey pairs very well with bolt gunmetal because they're quite similar in tone, but it's a flat paint rather than a metallic paint. Where bolt gunmetal gives the illusion of bare metal, Adeptus Battle Grey looks more like it would be plastic or ceramic. Now I'm just using the Adeptus Battle Grey to cover up the small areas where I was a little bit sloppy with the bolt gun earlier. Next I'll be using Citadel Color Dwarf Bronze for some detailing, namely the Aguila on his chest and the skulls on his bolter, forehead, and backpack. I like to use Dwarf Bronze as a base coat for gold, and really anything in that sort of range, because it tends to cover in one coat, whereas if you went to burnished gold or shining gold first, you might see some green showing through it. If you find the Dwarf Bronze isn't quite bright enough, you could easily go over it with some burnished gold or some shining gold later. Right now I'm just doing some minor touch-up where I didn't quite get to the edge of a detail with the Dwarf Bronze like I'd planned to. Next I'm going to use some Foundation Mechrite Red to paint the wax portion of his purity seal, and as well to put a base coat down for the eye lenses. Foundation paints tend to be quite thick in the pot, and when you're painting small details such as these eye lenses with them, you'll want to make sure you've already thinned them. You can either do that on your palette as you use it, or I like to actually add a thinning agent directly to the pot as soon as I open it, because I find foundation paints are thicker than I like them to be. Next I'm going to use a little bit of Reaper Aged Bone to paint the paper portion of the purity seal. Foundation Deneb Stone also works very well for this. Remember to look at your model from a couple different angles while you're painting it, because it can be very easy to miss part of a detail that might show up from the back when you're looking at only the front of the model, for example, such as the back of that little bit of parchment. Next I'm going to use Citadel Badab Black Wash to add some detail to a few areas, namely the bolter, the wax portion of the purity seal, and the vents on his backpack. Badab Black is a very useful general purpose shading wash and can be used anywhere you want to really preserve the original colors while still lending some shading and some deep shadows to areas. Many painters like to use Devlin Mud as their sort of go-to for that, which does tend to give things a little bit more of a dirty look, whereas Badab Black, because it is just pure black, tends to leave the original color a little bit more intact. Applying a wash in the tight areas, such as these small vents, is very simple. You just kind of swirl the brush around and make sure that there's a good even coat before you pull it back out. Lastly, I'm going to apply a small bit of Bedazzled Black wash to the mouth grill of the helmet, just to give it a little more depth. Next, I'll be using Citadel Griffin Sepia wash on the Aguila on the chest, as well as the paper part of the Purity Seal. Griffin Sepia works very well over brass and gold by giving the shadows a little bit of a red tint, which makes them look a little bit warmer. And now with just slightly over